This is Independence Day weekend and the second week of our summer message series, Pro Deo et Patria, for God and country. Since you are sitting here, it lets me know that you got the memo about our summer mass schedule. If any of you showed up at 9 a.m., I'm sorry. If you were planning on showing up at 11, well, you made it, so that'll be on them later. Also, if you're joining us today for the first time in a long time, we're especially happy you're here. And if you're joining us for the second time, that makes us especially happy, so welcome. 250 years ago yesterday, the Declaration of Independence was formally adopted by the Continental Congress. And a little more than a year before that, not far from here, the shot heard round the world was fired at the Old North Bridge in Concord. The American Revolution didn't just start out of the blue. It arose in response to the tyranny of Great Britain. This is a simplification, but the colonists yearned for freedom, whereas Britain wanted control. We could chart the history of the Proclamation of 1763, the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, and the Intolerable Acts of 1774. But you're not here for a history lesson. No, you're here to worship God and hopefully hear a spiritual lesson which is applicable to your life today. Someone once said, change only happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Change only happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. If you put a pot of water on a stove, a hot stove, eventually that pot is going to boil over. And for the colonists, the burden of tyranny became more painful than the pain of fighting back. Friends, you and I are subject to tyranny too. And if we want to be free, we got to fight back. To be clear, though, I'm not talking about overthrowing the government. I'm talking about the tyranny of sin. And the struggle of sin isn't something that takes place outside ourselves with weapons of war. Rather, it takes place inside with weapons of self-restraint. And the goal of this struggle is to be truly free, something which is near and dear to our American ethos. And the reason why Jesus came from heaven to earth. Jesus came from heaven to earth so that he could die on the cross to free you from the burden of sins. But, as St. Augustine teaches, God who saved you, who created you without you, will not save you without you. God who created you without you will not save you without you. God has given you the gift of free will. This freedom, however, is not a license to do whatever you want. Rather, it's a freedom to choose what is the best. These two conceptions of freedom have been called the freedom of choice and then the freedom for excellence. Freedom of choice and freedom for excellence. The freedom of choice says, I can do whatever I want as long as no one stops me. And the problem with freedom of choice is that it would have us believe that more choice equals more freedom. This type of freedom is a freedom from. It's a freedom from rules, limits, authority, etc. But on the other hand, we have freedom for excellence. And the freedom for excellence is the power to act well by choosing the best things. It's not a freedom from, it's a freedom for. Freedom for truth, beauty, goodness, virtue, the highest ideals. The freedom for excellence leads to inner transformation, and since it leads to inner transformation, it leads to true flourishing. And this makes sense because no human can flourish without love. And for us to be able to do something in love, we got to do it freely. Love can never be coerced. Without freedom, there's no love. In our gospel today, Jesus teaches us to reach for the highest freedom, the freedom for excellence. He lifts his eyes to heaven and he prays, "I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, for although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to little ones." In Jesus' prayer, there are two groups, the wise and the learned, and the little ones. In Jesus' time, the wise and the learned were the folks who thought that freedom was about mastering the law, controlling others, and protecting their own status. Which, if we're being honest, sounds a lot like freedom of choice. Since they didn't use their freedom to reach the highest ideals, they put a limit on their love. The little ones, however, are who Jesus addresses in the second part of the gospel when he shifts his eyes from heaven to earth, and then he gives us this invitation. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest." These burdens can be seen as the weight of sin and the weight of the results of sin. These are the things that limit our freedom. And Jesus' promise of rest is more than a future hope for heaven. It's an inner peace that begins to arise now when we accept his invitation and we use our freedom to act well and to choose the best things. Freedom for excellence. And then what Jesus says next is surprising. Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart." A yoke is a wooden beam with a harness that's placed on a beast of burden so that it can pull or lift a heavy load. Putting a yoke on ourselves might seem like the opposite of freedom. But here's the thing. Each of us always is yoked to something. If you're yoked to Jesus, you're going to be more free because with him you can reach the highest ideals and then receive all of the good things that Jesus wants to give. If you're yoked to sin, your freedom will become less and less. Because choosing the wrong things only delivers slavery, addiction, resentment, greed, loneliness, and more. The yoke of sin takes more and more, but it gives less and less. So, this weekend, as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, let's rekindle in our hearts a longing for true freedom. A true freedom that reaches for the highest ideals, a freedom from sin. May we take Jesus' yoke upon our shoulders, and may we live as men and women who are truly free. Pro Deo et Patria, for God and country.